Okay, this is going to be very raw because, as you can see, I'm just using a piece of paper and I've done no preparation other than to write down a few words so as I'll try and hopefully stay on track. And anyway, no more preamble than that. What I want to get into is I thought that I had better explain a bit more my rationale for Lambda being the Lamb of God. What we have here, and they said that the saying, when you put two and two together. So it only sometimes occurs to you when you put two and two together, what the meaning of four is, or, well, anyway, you get the idea there. I'm sure anybody who is either somebody who would identify as somebody who is a truth seeker, in inverted commas, and that can mean many things to many different people, or somebody who just simply likes learning things, likes making connections between things, and enjoys learning for its own sake, and somebody then who really just wants to know the truth about everything and try and make sense of the world. And the more connections you make between little things that seem insignificant, you build them up, and then you can make more profound realizations, I think. But in any case, let's try and stay with the basics here. What I've drawn here is capital Lambda. And you might think, oh, well, that just looks like an A, and all I'd have to do is put a line across there and then I have a capital A. Not quite. So it begins with L for Lambda. I'll have to go looking it up. I haven't learned off what numbers are what in the alphabet, but it's not the first one. And the Greeks got it, so I think it's the equivalent of L, but the Greeks got it from the Phoenicians. And here's the Phoenician version of it, which is, I kind of drew it badly there, so I had another go at it. Now, if I turn it this way, that's the stick. That's the third letter, which they would use to say, right, you know what a man and a bull is, and you know what a woman and a home is. So now I'm going to introduce you what I'm writing these symbols with, these signs, these pictures with, and that's the gimel, the stick, right? So gimel is where we get the word camel and coppel in Gaelic languages, which means a horse. So it's basically any four-footed animal that you use to move around on. So maybe a horse in finer pastures, greener pastures, and maybe a camel in sandy terrain where there's no water and you need something that's just going to keep going and not complain and need hay and water. But the way that it's presented to us anyway as the formal letter Lambda is like that. And curious enough, sometimes serendipitously, you draw something wrong and you see what I've nearly drawn here, which is a Z, which is Z for Zoroastrianism. See, sometimes I don't even know where to begin. I'm kind of skipping ahead. Where do we have camels? Everyone thinks the Middle East, but we also have camels in Australia. And why do we have camels in Australia? Because they were imported there. That's what the story says anyway. Because in the days before Toyota Land Cruisers and Land Rover Discoveries, or just Land Rovers, you would need something that was going to get you through the desert reliably. And you would bring packs of camels, and nature takes over and sometimes needs must, and you're in extremely harsh environments and you just have to do what you have to do to survive. So you bring a pack of camels and maybe you'd eat one if there was nothing else to eat. So sorry about that, animal lovers. Whether you sometimes hear factoids like, did you know that camels don't come from the Middle East, they actually originally come from Australia. I don't know, but that kind of thing deserves a further reading into. I'm not sure that's the case, and I don't think it needs to be anyway for anything I'm going to say here today. Now, they got them from the Middle East, let's say. Camels, where will I start? Okay, I did mention Zoroastrianism, so I'll bring that up. I'll get to it very quickly. What type of camels do we have? Well, if you're a little bit knowledgeable about camels, I'm not. You have Bactrian and dromedary. Bactrian and dromedary camels, okay? And then the little mnemonic that you use, sort of like the symbol word game, letter game thing that you use to help you remember which has two humps and which has one humps. Anybody? Bueller? Right, well, B for Bueller. And if you get a B and you write it this way, it's got two humps. Well, it doesn't really look like two humps there until you turn it, right, as you're supposed to do with these symbols. You're supposed to turn them around and look at them from every which way, right? So you draw it that way, and oh, whoops, maybe I've drawn something that doesn't look so good. Maybe it looks like, depending on how you see it, what ways your eyes are tuned in, maybe it looks like an arse, maybe it looks like a broken heart, maybe it looks like, a broken heart without this part in here. Take my lambda, capital lambda from down here, and turn it around, and I fill in the heart. But what I'm trying to say is I'm drawing a camel here, so that's the two hooves, that's the two humps, and then here's its legs. And isn't that just like what every school kid, every little boy and little girl who's only able to draw, barely learning the alphabet, that's what they'll draw for a camel, you see? And there's a wisdom in children, and there's a great insight in children, because they haven't been told, oh, everything you're doing is wrong. The symbols, the words that you're writing, and the symbols and pictures that you're drawing, it's all the same thing. And they're told, no, you have to separate that in your mind. Do you see how your mind gets fractured, and you can no longer see the shapes that are staring in your face anymore? I'm talking about myself too, by the way. This isn't a criticism of you. I'm including myself in this. I don't know anything either, okay? I'm just picking up a few stones around the place and recognizing the shapes that are there. I'm looking back into the clouds and seeing shapes, and I'm looking into the stars, and now I'm able to see the shapes of the hunter in the sky and the scorpion and everything else. So it's because I was trained not to. That's why I couldn't see it. Okay, so Bactrian and dromedary. So the Bactrian camel has two humps, and the dromedary has one hump, a D, but that's not a hump, but it is if I do it this way. What have I got here, by the way? I've got a dome. That looks like a dome, right? And you might say, yeah, so what? Well, it's a hot button topic. It almost looks like a button there, doesn't it? Everyone thinks we live under a dome. I do too, but which dome is it? Is it the dome of our own skulls? As above, so below. Not just incanting spells here. If something's true, it doesn't matter who says it. So what you see a lot is what's here is reflected in the heavens, and what's also below us is reflected back onto us, because we're made up of atoms and molecules, and so we're told, but let's just say that that's the story that we go with. And so so much of the subatomic and atomic level of things, the very, very small, the things that are measured in the 10 to the power of -9 meters and 10 to the power of -6 meters, somewhere in that range. When you get down to a millionth scale, divide something by a million and then keep going. So it's between a million and a billionth. That's 10 to the power of -6, 6 zeros, and 10 to the power of -9, 9 zeros. So the world has agreed, they didn't used to, but the world has agreed that's the difference between million and billion. Get down to that level, and all of a sudden you're looking at stars and planets and orbits again, allegedly, if that's what's going on up above. But whatever goes on above is reflected below, and so on, down into our atomic level of things. Now, let's move on before I run out of SD card space and you run out of patience. So we have two humps to the camel, all right? Now, what people always said was that, it's written in books, right? It says that this here, lambda, is the shape of a camel. Now, remember what I said before? Well, maybe you don't, but I did say before. I did say in one of my other videos that anytime you see an S shape like this, you're going on a journey. Now, that's also a snake. If you play the game of snakes and ladders, what do we have here? We have a snake and we have a ladder. I do wonder if there's anyone out there that thinks that there's any way to dispute that, because I think that's 100% indisputable. But there might be people looking at this going, well, this is really a reflection of a man gone completely mad. He's drunk on his own power, that he's disassembling letters and looking at the shapes, and he thinks he sees things. He needs to be put in the loony bin. I'm going to keep running, and I'm going to stay out swimming around in the water so they can't catch me. That's what I'm going to do. All right. So I couldn't see what I said. All right, well, that's kind of, going towards a hump. I couldn't see that was a camel. Put them two together, and you can see that what you're supposed to do is right now you have 4 feet. Okay. And you have the head of the animal, And, symbols are only supposed to draw, part of the picture for it. The rest you fill in with your mind, So you go here, and then you go here, and then you have your camel, right? Now we have something that looks much more like our childish drawing up here. Do you see? So I'm like Tony Hart, if you ever remember him. He used to draw pictures and then say, do you see what it is? Oh God, there's an Australian that used to say, do you see what it is yet? Oh, I wonder, that's just occurred to me. And look, who knows whether he did what he did. I don't know, the news told me. Just because somebody paints something and it's beautiful, and then you find out that artist had a bad life, or so the media told you, or he was cruel to his wife, or he never spoke to his children, or whatever it might be, doesn't mean anything about his art, right? So no one of us is perfect, and any of us can create something beautiful, and any of us can create something terrible. It does reflect on us in some way, but it doesn't mean who we are, or it doesn't make us be who we are. Now I want to get to, that reminds me of a couple of other things. E. What is that? So E is I, with stuff emanating from it. Okay. A is alpha, it's the man. But take out the man, take out the stick, take the I out of the alpha man, and what do you have? You have a vector. You just have a vector. So you take V, you turn it upside down like we have here, you put feet on it. Anytime you see horizontal lines like this, what that's saying is that's resting on the earth. Okay, so what it's doing is it's resting on the earth, and it's pointing you as a vector, an arrow with a direction, or a starting point rather, with a direction. That's what the arrow is doing, and it's pointing you up to the sky. And that's saying God is up there, right? And then the light that he shines down is going on this journey. So it's as above, so below, because it's coming down. And then here's a ladder back up where we can look to see. I'm not saying we have to build our Tower of Babylon and climb up. I'm not even sure. I'm not even sure. Maybe it'll occur to me later, what another level, or deeper level or higher level meaning of these things is. But the light that he sends down, it's measured in wavelengths. All right, so look, let's just humor me for the moment and say that we're talking about light in the form of a wavelength, in the form of a wave, not particles, and not a probability field, or even something else. So what a wave is, it's a way of propagating energy. Sound can do it, waves can do it, water can do it as waves, and light can do it as waves. So we're told, but let's just run with that. So this is a light wave, okay? And light waves are measured in the distance between the peaks is measured in a unit called lambda. That's the wavelength, or the length of one wave of light. And it can be at the micron level, which is a millionth of a meter, and it can be at the, I don't know what the word for it is, nano. It can be at the nanometer level, which is 10 to the power of minus 9, or a billionth. Okay, so all the different colours of light in between. That's measured with lambda, the Lamb of God. So the light that he sends down, Jesus was the light of God, or he brought the light of God with him, or he has the light of God shining always on him. He was the Lamb of God. So he was the light that was brought into the world, and he is the Lamb of God. Now, I'm not blaspheming, right? Don't get upset about this. I'm not trying to take away any of your understanding of the Bible or anything like that. I'm adding to it. And if you don't want to add to it, don't take it. The British used to always say, when they're having cups of tea, they presume that you're having sugar with it, and they say, 1 lump or 2? Do you see how everything's connected, right? Do you want 1 lump or 2? And like the British, by the way, were exploring, the desert regions. Once they settled New South Wales, they were going inland, and that's why they brought the camels with them. I'm sure they made the little joke to themselves, do you want a cup of tea before you set out? Do you want 1 lump or 2? And they go, you're talking about my camel or my cup of tea? Because maybe if it came to it and you were going to eat your camel, I don't know whether it was better to have 2 lumps of water, 2 lumps in your camel, or 1. And by the way, so I'm told anyway, or so I think I know from years ago, that a camel doesn't store its water in its humps anyway, so they might have been making a decision based on poor information. Right, let's go over to this corner over here. What can I pick up? Right, Bactrian. Where do we get the name Bactrian from? Well, it's of Bactria. Right, Bactria was a place of the Middle East, somewhere around Mesopotamia maybe. Part of modern day Iran. I wrote their old name Iran, but Iran these days would have some of what Bactria was in it. And they had the Zoroastrian religion. So what does Zorro mean? You know the Mask of Zorro? He was a swordsman. So just swap the Z for an S and you have Sora. Soro. It's a sword, right? So Zorro means sword, and Astrian. So an aster is the same as a star, is the same as Austra for star of the morning, or the dawn, in other words. So Astrian is anything to do with a star. So Stella and Astra are both Latin words for star. So we have sword, star, person. So what this kind of religion guy is he's the guy who looks up at God's sword in the sky, which is the three kings, and the star that it's pointing to. So that's what the Zoroastrian religion is. I don't even know about it, but it's summed up in the word, right? So it's the sword of the star, of the aster, the stella, which literally means star, literally with the letters. Okay, right, so that's where we get the Bactrian camel from, the one with two humps. So what about the one with one hump? A dromedary, right? So what is a dromedary? Well, it's one that has a dome, only a single dome, all right? And but there's more, right? So when you think of dromedary, you think of, perhaps Andromeda. If you're thinking of a star, yeah, that's a good connection. But also, let's break the word down. So where dromedary comes from is, or is related to the word rather, is sorry, I've lost my train of thought here now. Okay, we're looking up to the stars and we're thinking of the Andromeda galaxy, right? But where does Andromeda come from? Okay, so I'll write down Andromeda. Andromeda. Now, why am I pronouncing it wrong? It's not Andromeda because it is Andromeda. Just after a while, when you say stuff quickly, you start, how would you say, shaving off rough edges of how you say it and try and say it quicker because you're all used to the word. But we've got too used to it, we don't know its origins. So it's Andromeda, and it's really Andrometa, right? So you can transliterate D to T. If you think I'm making this up, you can confirm this with anybody who knows a bit about languages and transliteration, and they'll tell you that's absolutely valid. Even some people can't pronounce the difference between D and T. And the reason for that is because there really used not to be a lot of distinction between some of these letters that we have now in our current alphabet. And who is our? Is it US? Is it UK? Is it somebody else that doesn't speak English but uses the same alphabet? So Andro, what does that mean? Andro, well, it's where we got the boy's name Andrew from. But, another word might be popping into mind, but I'll get to that in a minute. So andro is the shape of a man. That's what it means. Andro is the shape of a man, or the form of a man. And meta is meta, right? Which is something that is outside of something, or is something that allows something to take shape from an exterior position. So Andromeda literally means man in the shape of, or the shape of man made. The shape of man made. Now, I'm sort of, sometimes when you translate things in an ugly way, and then you rearrange them a little bit until it sounds more pleasant to the ears. So man, or the shape of man, I should have written. So that's maybe what Simon is, Simon. So the shape of man, Andrew or Simon or whatever, right? And you can see where the biblical names come from. Was from an outside position, took shape. And the biblical phrase, God made man in his own image. He made him in his own shape as well, right? So image is just like, what he looks like in a 2D vision from a mirror. And, in his own shape is just if you put him in 3D in the world. So it's not a contradiction. It's just adding to the information, those two things that I said there. So he's in his own image and he's in his own form, he's in his own shape. So that's how God made Adam. And you can see that it's, a bit of a hop, skip and a jump, but you could go from Andro to Adam, and I don't think it would take too far, but I'll leave that for another time. I'll take a little break from the Andro and the Meda. We'll get back to Andromeda in a minute, but maybe you saw me here writing this Romane ite domum, and that reminded me there. with the dome. So what that is a home. Domum is your home. Now, this is the famous line, Romane ite domum, that is pig Latin, right? And I think I'll have to leave for another time the whole thing about pig Latin. It's incorrect Latin. It's like someone saying, "You home, go," all right? And then, of course, the Roman centurion comes along and takes him by, pulls his ear and drags him along. And instead of giving out to him for writing it as graffiti on the outside of a Roman garrison, he corrects his Latin and shows him how to decline the verbs properly. So we'll get into verb declining later. That's obviously going to have to be another video. And I can see now that there's no way that there's going to be time to do it in this video. And it's obviously not something I could even have done in as quick a time as I've done this, although this has been 20 minutes already. Oh boy. Okay, so meta in this context, as I say, is to do with making the man in his form. And andro is the form. So he makes form or takes shape. That's what Andromeda means. Andromeda is to take shape. So the Andromeda Galaxy then is something that takes shape. I'm not even sure that the Andromeda Galaxy exists. Certainly, I mean, it's not as if God said, "Here, I'll make the Andromeda Galaxy." Man decided to name a certain portion of the heavens after his own form. If you think about it, it was quite an act of hubris. So I'm going to say that it only exists as a notional concept or a literal concept or a vocal concept for now. So andro, if you say that somebody is a bit andro, what you think you're saying is that they are a bit, what would you say, of a neutral form, so that they're sexually ambiguous or something like that, especially if you would say that they're androgynous. But what the word actually means is that man, let's say, the man who was shaped, what's he shaped by? Well, he's shaped by the gyne. So androgynous, so you can see androgynous, right, is androgynous, but we're pronouncing it wrong. It's not androgynous, it's androgynous, or androgynous, if you want to say it. And that's where you get, like, the genus for the family of things, and, classifying things in botany and in the study of animals, animal husbandry, I forget the word for it. But if I write that down here again, you see how if I move the words around, maybe it's becoming a bit more close to a word you recognize now, but you have to move these things around. So gynous comes from gyne, which are the genitals, essentially, but particularly the genitals of a woman. And how do you know that? I'll give a little bit of the game away here, because if I write the letter Y as a capital letter, right, that is a symbol, and it represents the ovaries here. And here's the V, and here's the birth canal, and then out here will be... so I'm going to see if I don't have to put a rating on this, say it's not safe for children. This should be safe, but I mean, you know what the way the world is today. So androgynous doesn't really mean somebody who is of indeterminate gender or sexual outward characteristics. It means somebody who is formed by having been born. And actually, if you think about it, somebody who has been born, I don't... take stock in any of this doctors coming in and declaring that somebody is some gender or not, and assigning something to somebody. Maybe that particular sentence I've just uttered will be the thing that gets this video removed. But what I am saying is that, it's not the most obvious thing if a child is in its cradle or in its cot or in its crib or in its manger. It's not the most obvious thing to peer in to this swaddled little baby with blankets over it and look at its face and be able to say that that's a boy or a girl. And yourself, like, you've probably looked at a baby that was, maybe not so gentle featured. Maybe its face was a bit something that told your eyes, oh, this is a boy. So you said, you have a boy. I didn't know you had a boy as well. And they go, no, that's still my daughter. And you go, oh, right. I mean, it's just that, and there's no real coming back from that, is there? So the way that people do it to indicate and to tell the world, hey, this is a baby girl or this is a baby boy, is by having a pink for a girl and blue for a boy. And as far as QI, which is the program in Britain that says or that tells you about interesting things that are quite interesting you didn't know, it says it used to be the other way around. In Victorian times, it used to be blue for a girl, like as in powder blue, which maybe is a bit softer and more feminine, and some kind of vibrant or strong pink for a boy. maybe it was closer to red, so they thought, blood is virile, and therefore man is virile, and blood red will be suitable for a boy. And maybe they made it sort of pink, like, blood can look often very different depending on the thickness and consistency and kind of light that's shining through it. Who knows? Maybe that's where it came from. I better move on here because I'm running out of time. So androgynous can also mean, you see, on a different level, that it's of indeterminate sexual characteristics, as it should be when it's a baby in the crib, And but unfortunately, if it's a boy in America, it's most likely already been interfered with. And we're only concerned with the girls who might be in the Middle East who've also probably been interfered with. I mean, you would think that common sense would say, I don't care what it says in a book somewhere, or what I believe, or what my society is telling me to believe. If a baby is born a certain way, I'm going to assume God knew what he was doing, and I'm going to leave it alone, right? And I won't add to it, and I won't take away from it. Does that sound familiar? So I think, we should be more worried about what we're adding to people and what we're taking away from people, especially when they're innocent little babies in a cot, and they've just made a very frightening journey. And they'd like to relax and try and not even relax, just try and, figure out in their minds what does something just happen to them. Okay, I'm really trying not to say anything that might be offensive to anybody. So have I covered everything that I wanted to? I think just about, but I think there's probably some things that I've forgotten. I'm going to leave it at that because it's gone on for quite a while already. But look, there are symbols and letters, and I'm going to obviously have to do more on this. But what I really want you to start getting an idea of is that letters and numbers aren't different. They're all just symbols. Symbols and pictures and letters are similar. Logos are symbols. They're also a collection of symbols. Signs are a larger collection of symbols, perhaps, but signs, symbols, logos, and letters, and lines, and snakes and ladders, and everything. It's all just the same thing. And you need to stop. Your mind has been broken by thinking that all these things are separate, right? So you need to try and put your mind back together again and look at everything in a new way, and not just in a different way and throw out the old way. I'm saying to add to the new way. And there's not just two different ways. I think there's any number of levels of different ways, and levels that wrap back into themselves again. And that's how they self-support. There's been very little nice things to look at. So what I'll tell you is I'll give you a little preview of a few things. What I have here is a book for children. Now, I'm not saying that I'm teaching you stuff because I know it all. I know nothing. And I've just picked up a few stones, and I'm just examining their shape. And this is a book for children, believe it or not. I don't know exactly offhand how old this was, but I suspect it's pre-World War II. Now, before World War II broke everybody's minds, the minds of a generation, and the ones that came after. Even boys and girls who were, not even teenagers, they knew a lot more about the world than we do. Now, you might say, but they knew wrong information. Yeah, well, they knew a lot more wrong information even than you do. These are just beautiful illustrations. These were the most precious things that people had, and they would give their children these things. So I'm saying that we're all a little bit swimming in treacle, or swimming in frozen water. And I'm actually swimming out to where it's a little bit warmer and it's easier to swim. And I'm just trying to say, look, you can stay there if you want, but I know that if you could see a bit of the rest of it, you could then, if you really hate it, decide to swim back. But I think you'll like it. So I'll leave it at that for now and keep it under the half hour. And thank you very much for listening.